and welcome to our first in-person speaker in 2 years. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, please do clap, please clap. And not only that, Dr. Chowdhury has come all the way from North Carolina to be here to speak with you all. So another clap for him just for that, for braving the airplane. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce a very, very good friend that I've known for years, Dr. Ashfaque Chowdhury. He holds a bachelor's degree in engineering from Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay. He then also completed a master's degree and a Ph.D. from Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. And with a strong interest in service, he volunteered for education and charitable institutions. Very importantly, he serves on our brand new MBA advisory board. And kind of bringing you through his career a bit, he's a well-known executive in logistics. He will be talking about that a bit today. And he's been doing this for 25 years. He helped his company grow and build a global brand through exceptional combination of strategic thinking, deep technology insight, operations expertise, and commercial acumen. Known for innovation and results orientation, as well as people-centered leadership, he led a $2.5 billion business with over 30,000 associates across 4 continents. Until recently, he was president of Supply Chain of Americas and Asia Pacific for XPO Logistics, a leading global provider of transportation and logistics solutions. And in August 21, the business was spun off as a new public company, GXO Logistics, the second largest contract logistics company in the world. So I would like to welcome Dr. Ashfaque Chowdhury to talk to you today about post-COVID business trends.
Wishing everybody good evening. All of us are, probably not used to being with lots of people, so it's great to see everybody here today. Welcome to the students, the faculty, the other advisory board members who are here today, other members of the audience, and the online audience as well. So I have some good material, good facts. I think it'll be engaging. I'm looking forward to your questions and an engaging discussion at the end. So look forward to your thoughts, and we will talk about that at the end. I wanted to thank the Lee MBA programs at UNLV for inviting me to talk at this event. I think it's important that we have more forums to highlight the great work that's being done by UNLV and the great opportunities that the students here have. I'm really delighted to be here at the Greenspun Hall here. It's such a wonderful facility. It's a delight to talk in an environment which is set up for this event. So, before we go a bit further, let me tell you a little bit. So this is all stuff Angela just talked about. Let me tell you a little bit about what's not on the page. When I was 5 years old, a war broke out in my country, and I was separated from my parents. I was on the run for a few months. So you might say, I started off as being a war refugee. So it's a long way from there to here. And along the way, I did many things. And I always had the idea that I could do whatever I set my mind to, even though sometimes it didn't seem realistic. Well, and today we'll talk a bit about, some of the opportunities that are coming up, and many of you here, how you can, also engage and do that. So let's start with the word ambition. So everybody has ambition. That's why all of you are here. And we'll talk about COVID, but first, I wanted to understand why you're here and how you can benefit from the talk today. So just by show of hands, how many here has an ambition to change the world? It's a big ambition. Okay. Okay, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Okay, how many of you want to become a billionaire? Okay, not that many. I would have thought more. How many want to have a positive social impact with something you do? Wow, so lots of folks. Great, great. How many of you want to lead a company? Well, many, many people. How many want to open your own business? You have great ideas. All right, well. And how many of you want to make your family proud? Almost everybody, right? And I could tell you, depending on your family, that's probably the hardest goal that's on that page. You could do all the other ones sometimes, that's not enough, right? Well, thank you for participating. So we have ambition, and ambition can help us take advantage of opportunity when it presents itself, right? So if you are prepared and you have ambition to do something, you have to act. You can't just dream about it, you have to do something about it. And today we're going to talk about the world that we are in today, how it looks with numbers, with facts. And within those facts, there's opportunity. And hopefully some of you will be encouraged, some of you will be curious, and will find some things that will benefit you. So with that, let's jump into what we're going to talk about today, our topic. So COVID-19 has been a black swan event, right? It's unpredictable. It has totally changed so many things about our world. And I won't talk about the healthcare side of it. I'm not an expert in it, and I'm sure if you turn on your TV, you've been inundated with many information about that. And also, it's been a human catastrophe. Many people have been impacted personally. I have lost family members, and I'm sure many of you have had friends and family and acquaintances that have been touched by it. So it is not something to make light of. So today we'll talk about how there's opportunity in it, but I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that it is in fact not a good thing. It is. I wish that we could have avoided so much suffering. But with that, let's just look at what it has done. When I focus on the logistics world, which is I know a bit or two about, how what's happening with COVID-19 has changed how logistics and transportation gets done around the world. And we'll focus on these 4 areas: the consumer behavior, how that's affected how supply chains are structured, the behavior about workers, and also technology adoption. But the bottom line with this is going to be that there's lots of problems. You'll see that it's full of problems. COVID has created all sorts of things that we didn't think about. And there's lots of new ideas and new leaders that's going to be needed to work these problems. So that's what, I won't give you the ideas, and obviously you are the leaders, but I'll certainly give you a parade of problems that is out there today. So, and disruption always leads to opportunity. So let's first look at the disruption. So if you look at just plain fact, US GDP for the last 50 years, you could see that we've had a few recessions here and there, but nothing like 2020. So it's the biggest recession that we've had in 50 years, if not longer. So we don't have this type of a massive change without something happening, right? So definitely there has been a disruption. Now let's look at something else. The S&P 500. I could have used Dow, but the basic result's the same. If you look at where the S&P 500 is today, it's up. It doesn't look like it's been disrupted. So we have this massive disruption. GDP is down. The economy is not doing well. Why is the market going up? Right? So there is something going on here, right? So, and as we go through it, I think I'll come back to the same point I started with. The market is up because we are optimists. There's investors who believe that there's opportunity in here. So on one side, there's disruption, there's proof of disruption. On the other side, there's opportunity, and this is the proof of opportunity because people are putting money down to say, no, these guys are going to figure it out. So let's start with thinking about consumers. All of us are consumers, and we have all experienced this. So how have our behavior changed when it comes to the impact of COVID? So if you kind of close your eyes for a second and imagine before COVID, and imagine and compare that to who you are today. And look at this list and think about how many of this you could say, yeah, that's me, right? So more shopping online, less visit to retail stores, right? I could say, yeah, I do that, right? Less eating out, more eating at home, right? You know, and the reasons are obvious, but these are changes that hasn't been done by a few people, not by 10,000 people, 100,000 people, 1 million people. It's hundreds of millions, if not billions of people have changed their behaviors this way. And there's consequences of making that kind of changes in behavior. Some of the other things people have done, changing how we exercise, right? Some people have done less. Some people have done more, right? And people have stayed home a lot more. Well, guess what people have done? Well, they say, there's all these projects. I want my home to be a better home. And all these projects that I've been putting off for all these years, let's go do it. And also, we have had a period because of the change, because that we have been isolated and had focused on our views and beliefs, we've had a lot more social awareness. So people have looked at what they believe in. There is so much more societal awareness and change going on because, in some ways, because of COVID, because people have had that time to reflect. So we're more socially aware, and many of us are now making choices supporting brands that align with what we believe. So all these things are changes in behavior. Let's see if we can measure that a little bit. So I'll start off with what I was just talking about, the social awareness side. So Accenture did this study in 2021, and reacting to that statement, that pandemic made me totally revise my personal purpose and what is important for me in life. Well, that's a pretty big statement. And it's amazingly 50% of consumers said, yeah, that's true for me. Well, which means that almost everybody has changed, a majority of the people have changed what their priorities are about how they spend their money, what they spend their time on. And when it comes to buying online, 50% of consumers are buying more online, and 40% or more of people are buying products online that they would have never considered buying before. Right? So it's not just you're buying the same things, you're buying different things. So everything from buying cars online, right, to which a lot of people wouldn't have tried before, to mattresses and all kinds of other, goods. So all of this created a lot of demand spikes in 2020. So I've listed a few that, very, very well-known demand spikes. So big demand spike for pasta. Okay. Why? Well, because people are staying at home and they know how to cook pasta, right? Toilet paper, home office equipment, big, on, cameras and mice and keyboards and office equipment and things like that. Appliances, exercise equipment, unusual hair color and makeup. People said, I don't have to go home. Maybe I don't have to do makeup. I want to look differently because now I'm on video. Right? So all these changes have come about because the starting point of all of this is behavior change. Well, so when you think about the impact of all those decisions by hundreds of millions of people, it is very, very, very significant. If you look at this chart, it shows US retail sales and the portion of those retail sales that are e-commerce. So in this chart, if you go to this end of the chart, which is, the more recent side, you could see that second quarter of 2020 and third quarter of 2020, we had this massive spike. So right in the beginning of COVID, what happened? Well, people bought a lot more online. Well, it has come down a bit since then, you know. And you could see that the green bar is continuing to rise. So, you know, in effect, actually now the retail sales are back. So in 2020, in the third quarter of 2020, when this was happening, the phrase that I used at the time was, we saw the peak of 2025 in 2020. So it's almost like if you look at that curve, for us to get to that 16, 17% penetration, it would have been 2025. And suddenly, without any warning, this, you know, sort of people's behavior change, what would have taken 5 years, happened instantly. Right? Well, this doesn't seem so dramatic in this chart, but let me show you the chart in a different way. So let's look at it differently. Let's look at it as a year-over-year change, right? So if you look at it as a year-over-year change, you see that the e-com demand, you know, jumped some. I mean, every year it was fairly, you know, in the mid. It was at call it a 15% CAGR, 16% CAGR. Year over year, it was consistently growing at that rate, right? So that's somewhat flat in that between 10 and 20%. And so most people expected it to be somewhat there. But look at where it was. It was 40, 45%. Well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because think about you being responsible in a retail organization. Say you were the person who was going to decide how much pasta our company was going to make next year. Well, in fourth quarter of 2019, there was no way you are going to go in and submit a request for somebody to make. You would have said, okay, you know, every year it's 15% more, let's make 15% more. You would not have said, oh, let's make 50% more, right? So the impact of that behavior, the way it created demand problems, is because we, in the supply chain world, use history and information for us to make predictions. And these predictions were completely disrupted by this event because nobody expected so many people to change their behavior overnight. And also, interestingly, you know, it is coming down and the retail sales are going back up. So we are somewhat stabilizing, but we're still at that elevated level. So now, when people decide to buy something online instead of going to a store, lots of things happen in the supply chain. It costs a lot more resources to do it in different parts of the supply chain. When a unit of product is bought online, it takes 3 times distribution space. Why, you may say? Because, you know, there is no retail stores, right? So retail stores hold a lot of product. It displays a lot of product. Well, that product still has to be held and displayed now further back in the supply chain. So that creates a lot more need for distribution space. It's also a lot more work, right? Because it's a lot easier for us to take a pallet of product or a box of product and put it on a shelf than to pick it out one by one. Because in a retail store, the consumer is doing that work. They are picking it out one by one. And 3 to 5 times the transportation cost, right? If you think about a truckload of product somewhere in the middle of the country, right? It costs so much to drive that truck. Now, if you take everything that was in the truck and put one item each in a box and you shipped it via a small parcel carrier, think about how much more cost that's going to be, right? And that's that much more cost because all those products, somebody's driving to somebody's home in order to do that. Well, so it is much more resource intensive. And finally, it creates a lot of demand variability, right? So what is demand variability? Demand variability has to do with how fast you can distribute something. So demand variability comparative to a store where the store can plan. And so yes, you know, a store will sell more at Christmas than it will sell in, say, the month of June or something like that, depending on the product. But it can plan for it, and it might be 50% more. It might even be double. But it's not going to happen without warning, and it's going to have a lot more time for somebody to be able to manage that. Well, in e-commerce, demand for product can go not 50% more, 3 to 7 times more. So today you're shipping 1,000 units, tomorrow you might be shipping 7,000 units. Well, you need to have capacity to be able to handle that type of demand, and which also requires a lot of resources and planning. So all of these things, and of course, e-commerce costs are also offset by the fact that you don't have the retail stores, right? So it's the whole retail infrastructure that offset that cost, but in any case, if you don't have it, you need to build it. And the impact that COVID has had is multiplied because this changed in a way that created huge demand for additional resources all through the supply chain. Now let's take a look at how this manifests itself, right? So here's a very simple one. USPS package volume in billions of units. You look at, so 2017, 18, 19, we're at 5.7 to 6.2 billion packages a year. Suddenly, in 2020, we had 7.3 billion. So it jumped up 1.1 billion more packages. That's a lot of packages, So that's 3 packages each for every man, woman, and child in this country. More, in a given year. So just like the guy who was trying to predict pasta, well, the person who was trying to plan for how many trucks you're going to need to distribute packages, they're running out of capacity. They're being surprised, so they have to do something to adjust as well. So, and this is how it plays out. So here's article from Maritime Executive. It's a trade paper that focuses on maritime affairs. It says record vessel backlog at Southern California ports in January of 2021. So as you can see, this is the Port of Long Beach, which is the premier port on the West Coast. It's a hub through which lots and lots of imported goods arrive in our country. And there was 110 ships in the port, and 60 of them were waiting for a berth. It's a huge amount of backlog, because the port just couldn't absorb it. Well, there's no, big news today. I just took this picture September 20th, a couple of days ago. Look, it's 82 ships in the port. I don't really see a lot of difference in the 2 pictures, right? Well, what does that mean? That means that this elevated level of activity and demand, well, we are adapting to, we're somehow handling it so it's not a crisis anymore, but it exists. It's still very busy, right? Truckload rates. So truckload rates is a key indicator of how much money is spent in transportation, because 70% of goods that are distributed are just moved by trucks. So year over year, truckload rates for covered van, so which is the normal van you see running on the road, is up 24%. Flatbed is up 34%, and reefer, which is refrigerated trailers, is up 29%. It's a massive, massive price increase, 30% more, something that, from what it cost a year ago. Well, fact is that not only is that high, but it went up like 30% last year. So compared to 2 years ago, these things are up, through the roof, 50% plus more. So it's costing a lot more for transportation because we are running out of resources. There's lots of competition, limited supply of that capacity, which is bidding up the rates. All this is caused all the way back because everybody started to buy things differently. So let's look at space for a second. So this is a chart of US industrial real estate market. It is at historically low vacancy rates. If you look at the chart is, and the blue bars are what's called net absorption, meaning how much space we use every year. so how much space is leased. The green bars are the construction, so how many new facilities are built every year. So the net of both of those things determine, how much vacancy. So, if you wanted to go find some space, how much space is available. Well, as you could see, the line, the vacancy rate dropped from, say, back in the last peak around 10%, and a normal time around 7-8% range, to now all the way down to 3 or 4%. So it's historically low availability, which means that when you have all those ships that came into the port, you finally got it out of the port, and then you paid a lot of money to have it trucked to somewhere. Well, you don't have any space to put it away because you can't rent any space to put it away. So all the steps along here are being impacted, and we are running out of capacity, right? Now, how about building some more? So, okay, there's more demand. How about we build more space? Well, this is the chart of how much space is under construction. We are actually at a historically high point in construction, and we have been in 20 and 21, right? So we have, as you could see, since 19, the rate of construction has continued to go up. This is a quarterly chart. And so we have added 30-40% more facilities that we are building at any time. But that's just not enough. It's still not keeping up with the demand for space. And again, because of the same reason. So it's COVID. It's the impact that it's having on how much space is needed to service the demand from the consumer. So all of these constraints, as you could see, multiply. One thing eventually exhausts the supply of something else, that exhausts the supply of something else, and it creates even more problems. But at the same time, people find creative ways to solve those problems. So all of these things, here's an article from Fortune, July 8, 2021, this year. Look at the price of steel, right? So the price of steel was at $500. Now it's at $1,825. It's an amazing rise in the price of steel. Now, since then, I think it has come down a bit. But, these swings are not 10 or 20%. They are massive, massive change. And as you could see from then, going all the way back years, it has never shifted more than, say, $200. And I listed steel, but we've had shortages and price increases in lumber. Very, very big situation going on today in semiconductors, which is shutting down auto factories. And autos themselves are in short supply. So when you are thinking about how the impact of COVID is impacting the different parts of the supply chain, it is much more than just we don't have enough space or we don't have enough trucks. It's really every type of product, every type of industry, every type of consumer is having an impact because your choice that you're trying to make is not, you're being constrained. You can go, I'm sure all of us have experienced that we've ordered something, I was told it was going to be delivered a particular day and it didn't, which historically we have been pretty good at that. Or I really, really wanted to buy something and it's not available. It's not available anywhere. Well, the root cause is this. Now, depending on the product and depending on where it is and what time it is, the exact reason might vary. But all of it share the same issue, which is structurally our capacities and our abilities to manage the demand is based on our view of what we predict and what we are ready to be able to support. And what COVID has done is upended that prediction. So we are really not too sure about what to be ready for, or we may know what to be ready for, we just don't have enough resources to be ready for it. So as you might imagine, there's a lot of different things that has to change in order to fix all of this. Well, let's switch topics for a second, and let's look at the worker side of it. So we talked a lot about consumers and how consumers impacted the supply chain. Let's look at the worker behavior, and some of us work too, right? So some of it might be us. But I have focused more here primarily on the hourly worker, people who are actually, don't have the choice of maybe working from home as much, right? So it's the truck driver that's out there driving the truck. It's the warehouse worker who's on a forklift or who's working and who's going to work every day because their job cannot be done remotely. Well, how are they feeling? Well, there are lots of changes in the worker behavior there as well. I focus very much on transportation and logistics, so certainly my viewpoints and my awareness of what's going on in this industry is what I'm aware of, but I'm sure a lot of this are very similar in other industries as well. So one of the things is that people are waiting to, return to work, right? So they're not quite yet ready for whatever reason, right? Or there's difficulty with childcare preventing work, right? It's a big problem. If you have a child that you have to take care of and you don't have an ability to have childcare, you can't work. People, many people will make that choice. It's a very understandable choice. So this is an area that's impacting availability. Expectation of more flexibility. Whatever you expected your job to be, say in 2019, suddenly in 2021, that probably isn't good enough for you anymore. Well, from an employer perspective, that change in your expectation, well, what can the employer or what should the employer do in order to be able to adapt? Right? So that starts to create its own challenges. Work from home, right? So, I could go on. That probably could be an hour topic just from that. So I won't go too much in there, but I would tell you that, no matter who it is and what type of job it is, flexibility and remote work and all of those things are an issue even at an hourly work level. And also what we are seeing is there's lots and lots of choice. There's a lot of jobs that are vacant. Lots of choice in employers from a worker perspective. So, and it's showing up at less loyalty to a given work environment. Less team cohesion and attachment to work. Even if you're going to work, you're not interacting with folks. You're not going out to lunch. You're not sitting together. You're not working closely together in the work floor, right? Because, COVID protocols mean that people are separated by necessity. Well, all of that also means that you're probably not as attached to the 3 people that you work with every day that you used to, maybe, 2 years ago. And then there's also a phenomenon where people just try jobs. They continue to just try jobs. They'll show up for a job for 2 weeks, and then they don't like it. They go to another job for 2 weeks and another job. And they can continue to do that. So, which from an employer perspective is, it's completely not productive, right? So by the time you train somebody or by the time somebody really is hitting that point where they can actually do productive work, that worker's gone and you have to start over again to find somebody. So all of these things are changes in worker behavior that's happening. Well, let's look at the numbers as to how this type of behavior is affecting, our availability of workers. So unemployment rate, right? So the number one thing everybody looks at. Well, as you can see, so this graph here shows each year in sequence, right? So, and by the way, all of these data I have notated on the bottom, where it's from. So this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, bls.gov. Those of you who have not taken advantage of the data that's available on BLS or the census, I strongly encourage you to do that. There's fantastic availability of information from these sources. So this particular chart shows unemployment shot up as soon as COVID came in. Lots of people got laid off. But then things started opening up again and unemployment came down. And even so, in 2021, we pretty much have about a 2% gap, right? So we did not go back to the 2019 levels of unemployment. So we're still at a 2% higher unemployment than where we were. So you would think that if there's 2% higher unemployment, there's 2% more people that should be available for work, right? Seems logical. So compared to 2019, we should have more availability of workers. This data implies that. But our experience is not so. And let me show you why. So here's a chart that says the population of 16 plus individuals that are not in the workforce. So it's a participation rate conversation. And the way BLS provides it, it's in raw numbers. So as you could see, even in 2019, there was roughly, call it 95 million individuals that are 16 plus. And there's lots of great reasons why somebody shouldn't be in the workforce, and I won't get into it. This is just data, right? So, but what has happened as people have gone out of work and come back into work, suddenly, as you could see in the green bars, the data on 2021, there's an additional 5 million people that are no longer in the workforce. That's a lot of people. That's 5 million working adults that used to be in the workforce that are not in the workforce. Well, that's why even, these people are not counted in the unemployment numbers. So this is one of the reasons why we are seeing the shortage of workers, right? The competition for workers being higher, because even though the unemployment rate is not quite down at that level, we just have less people in the workforce now. So the percentage might be a little bit higher, but the raw numbers of workers that are available are less by 5 million people. So focusing down on logistics and transportation, when I look at logistics, so here's the same chart, just looking at the number of employees that are in logistics, and also I show on the corner chart what's happened of their wage increases during that time period. So in logistics, as you could see, that as the demand has gone up, logistics has been able to attract a bit more workers. I mean, it's not phenomenally high, it's not 30 or 40% higher, but it is certainly, continued to attract and grow, because year over year you could see that, 20 is higher than 19 and 21 is higher than 20 in here. But in order to do that, you could see that the wages have gone up a lot. So over the last 2 years, it's gone up 2.7, 3%, and 6%. But 21 is a partial year. That's why I noted that this summer, the latest data for this summer, the increases are 7.9%. So that's a lot to go up in a year over year, right? Especially when you stack it on some very healthy increases for the previous couple of years. So in logistics, we are getting the employees a bit better, but it's costing significantly more money than was being spent per hour in order to get that. Different picture in transportation. So I again focused on truck transportation because that is sort of the big picture. Here, actually, the wages have also gone up, but the total number of employees, the green bars, is lower than where we are in 2019. So we have actually less people driving trucks than we had in 2019 by significant hundreds of thousands of people, right? And wages have gone up. The 21 number is a little bit misleading because the summer increases are more like 5%, so I think it will correct when the full year is reported. So, but they're going up at a fairly high level. I mean, with the very low level of inflation that we've experienced so far, though it might change, the cost of living increases have been 1 or 2%. So there's been significantly higher increases for the last 2 years trying to attract more workers in trucking, but in trucking it's really not working. We are somewhat falling behind to have the right amount of level of workers available to have the trucks, and that's part of the reason why the prices are going up, because there's just not enough workers to be able to actually drive the number of trucks. So the number of trucks you can drive, I mean, you're going to charge higher for it or give it to the highest bidder. So the behavior from an employee perspective also has very significant consequences, because that side looks at, so consumer behavior changes demand, and demand has gone up and changed its profile. The worker side behavior changes capacity, and capacity has gone down, or in many cases just has been different, right? Because the number of hours, the flexibility, how you do the work is different. So both these things create challenges in order to meet demand, because you have higher demand and lower capacity. Now, if you can meet the demand, of course, you have higher sales and all this stuff. It could be a good news story. But right now, it is a tough story, and lots of people are working very hard in order to make this challenges, kind of work and get all the products that all of us need to run our lives every day show up. So I'm going to switch topics and talk a little bit about technology. So all these things are happening, some macro data, right? Well, it's not all gloom and doom. Because one thing that's also happened during this time frame is we have this fantastic array of new technologies that are coming in to make dramatic changes in how things can be done. So adoption of new technologies have been significantly accelerated because of COVID. So people would have said, well, let's do a pilot, let's do this, let's do that. Now it's like, all right, we think that's going to work. Let's see how fast we can put that in production, right? So that has allowed a lot of these technologies to take hold faster than they would have otherwise. Now I've listed 4 technologies here. Artificial intelligence-based predictive analytics, a very, very big area. If you recall in the beginning of the conversation, this whole problem started because the guy didn't know how much pasta he needed to order, right? So if he had AI-based predictive analytics that could have told him, well, 15% is not going to be enough, 40% or 50% is what you need to order, we would have been much better off. Well, people want to fix that, right? Autonomous robotics, another area. So robotics is really coming to a different level than it has ever been. So we have now autonomous robots that are actually going into production floors. So we're not talking about the future, we're talking about now. That future is now. And we'll talk a bit about that, drones and also autonomous vehicles. So you look at AI and predictive analytics, these are some of the areas that are being used. So certainly demand forecasting, also accelerating the predictive cycle. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you go back like 30 or 40 years, people used to do annual forecasts. Hey, we're going to sell, X amount of jeans or X amount of whatever product. And that's the order that was cut to manufacturing. Then it went to seasonal, so much in spring, so much in winter. Well, with all the new technology we have, it could be as quick as weekly or daily. And it also means that you can delay when you have to make that decision. So you have much more accurate information. If you have a shortage or you have a capacity constraint, you can incorporate that in your planning cycle. So those are all technologies that are coming in. Price optimization, right? Being able to predict as somebody who sells something, what the market will bear. Where should I set the price? How should I structure pricing? AI is very big in being able to help that. And a few other cool stuff. I'll focus also on the last one, which is sort of unusual. Predicting climate change and how it will affect. I mean, if I'm going to sell umbrellas, right, it would be nice to know if it's going to be a rainy spring next year, right? If it's going to be a rainy spring, and if I know, hey, it's going to be raining in this particular area, not that particular area, I'd be able to put more product in that right spot. And for people who grow food, that predicting that climate change and how weather can be incorporated on an operational basis is great because it can truly affect your ability to deliver. So, and the robots are here. So I've given you some pictures of some of the leading companies and some of the leading products. 6 Rivers makes this robot. They call it the Chuck. It's basically an autonomous cart that knows where to go, and the workers don't have to walk, they don't have to push. You have the gray-orange robotics. It's another type of robotics, that lifts the shelves. Amazon made it very popular with their Kiva product many years ago. Locust Robotics makes a different kind of product. It's a swarm robots. It's many, many robots that run around. and they interact within themselves to figure out how to solve a problem. So all these things are not future. These are thousands of these units are now in production. In fact, when we look at our future, the solution to a lot of those problems we talked about are not going to be more of the same as the past. It's going to be more of something completely different, and it's going to have robots in it. Drones. So we hear a lot about drones and delivery using drones with Amazon Air and so on. But the company that's actually currently has a drone airline in production is UPS. And they're doing commercial deliveries today. There are also other uses for drones, like taking inventory in the warehouses with little drones running around and figuring out what products in what location. Trailer and yard inventory. So how many, if you have a huge trailer, you have 1,000 trailers out there, trying to figure out what's in spot 565. It's not that easy. You have to have somebody go there or use a camera. Well, the drones can figure those things out. And security. So on large facilities and campuses, having drones, having camera systems and other things to provide a better security system. And I know you've heard a lot about the autonomous trucks and autonomous vehicles. Well, I'm here to tell you it's here. TU Simple is actually selling mass-produced level 4 autonomous Class 8 trucks. Well, it's not quite level 5, which is the fully autonomous. Level 4 is where it's autonomous in most conditions. So, there might be some conditions where it's not autonomous, but it's in production, and they're selling it. Other notable companies are Tesla and Waymo, who are also have products coming out, and many other, traditional automakers. They all have products in this space that they're coming to bear because they want to also produce products to defend, people who traditionally sold trucks. So all these things are happening today, and these things are going to change how we solve the problem that we face with COVID. So, in summary, I think you see that what the pandemic has done on logistics and transportation is forced structural change. It means that there's no going back. It's not going to get over, and we're just going to be the same as before. There is no before anymore. It's just forward. We will create a new solution because people are not going to be the same as before. I don't know about you. I love curbside delivery. I'm not giving that up, right? Even if there's no COVID, I still want my curbside delivery, right? I don't want to get out of my car. Well, somebody on the other, that creates a challenge in the supply chain. So these behavior changes, some of it will change for sure, but the solutions we will create are going to be new solutions using new technologies. And what will that do? It will be new ideas and new players who will emerge. It's not going to be the same group. It's not going to be the same people. So, which means opportunity. So, at the end of the conversation, I bring it back to what we started the conversation with, about ambition, right? When opportunity knocks, it doesn't throw down your door. It knocks very, very softly. You got to listen. You got to be ready. Well, I could tell you with the numbers, there's lots of opportunity. I hope many of you find interest in the logistics and supply chain world and have ideas, have things that you want to pursue. And I encourage you to look at many of these resources and some of these numbers. Try stuff. And you'd be amazed how much change you can bring. So thank you very much for your attention. And I look forward to engaging with you with your questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So how about some questions, guys? Yeah.
Jeremy.
So kind of a multifaceted question. On one of your slides, you mentioned, let's say 100,000 less drivers, right? And you also said that I think it was 5.4% the summer increase in terms of income. I'm just curious, two parts. One, is that increase in income normal, or is it a result of having a shortage that they're trying to, let's just say, have more drivers come in as an example? And the second part of that question is, how do you, as the expert, foresee, that's a hell of a change to have 100,000 less drivers, right? How do you foresee the industry responding to that? Is it just autonomous or semi-autonomous drivers? Like, what do you see happening? Because it doesn't feel from your presentation like this is feels permanent, essentially. And I'm not sure if that's true, but how do you see this going?
Okay, great question, Jeremy. So for everybody who might not be able to listen, Jeremy's question is, the first part is, how is the industry, what is causing this 100,000, driver shortage, that's come down in the last 2 years, even with the wage increase. And the second part of the question is, what's the long-term outlook by the industry to handle this? So on the first part, just answering your question, this is not a new phenomenon. People who are driving trucks, their ages are continuing to rise, which means that drivers are older and older, and newer folks, younger folks, are not taking to truck driving as a job as much as people used a generation ago. So this is a big problem, and lots of people and lots of experts have been working on this for a while. So we have had this problem. What COVID did is, kind of really hit us where it hurt the most, right? And in terms of a solution to the problem, there's lots of things that are being done. There are companies that run their own trucking schools. They incent people in other ways beside wages, so people can learn that trade and get into the business. However, I do believe that there are going to ultimately be autonomous vehicles as the solution that is going to ultimately solve this. All those young folks who've spent all this time playing the video games, well, guess what? You might have a video game job somewhere, monitoring 100 trucks somewhere, and when that level 4 truck encounters something that needs you to drive it, you could be sitting somewhere else and be driving that truck for that next 15 minutes, and then move on to some other truck, right? So it's a tiering or layering of technology. So the first was the autonomous. Now you also need the network, right? So this is why you see the 5G networks and all the other networks, because there is actually completely new use cases that if we had a really, really reliable network, we could use that network to do things a dramatically different way. So I think there are breakthrough things that will have to solve the problem, because I don't know that the industry has tried for a number of years, and the wages, you could make a really decent living driving trucks, by the way. So it's not an easy problem to solve. Great question, Jeremy. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So you've mentioned automation and unemployment rates. How do you think the automation advancement will affect the unemployment rates?
So, the future is not either or. It's not either robots or people. It's and. And today, right, even with all the robots, we have jobs that are not being filled. So we just don't have enough people. In fact, we don't have enough robots, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough of either. So it's not a competition between the two. And also, the jobs that have to be done are very different. The way technology changes the jobs, it changes it for the better. People who are working in the automated facilities, they love it. Because an average worker, when they're picking with using a manual cart, they're walking 12 miles a day, pushing a cart. That's your job. Well, if the cart could figure out where to go itself and you don't have to push it, it's motorized, right? Not only are you more productive, you're more happy. You're more safe. You're not going to have as much injuries. You're not going to slip. So we have to find ways to think about the problems in ways that create solutions that are not, zero sum, where we have to find where 1 + 1 makes 3. And in your discussion, I think the unemployment rate, I think, is a factor of a lot of worker behavior things. The jobs themselves are there and they'll continue to grow, and the jobs will become more tech savvy, but that doesn't necessarily mean people have to have this training. I mean, how much training has people needed to go, like, play a video game, right? So the technology is going to be easier to use, but it's going to be a different job than what you did, in order for us to get the solution. At least, I'm an optimist, that's my view. Questions?
Another question. You mentioned about a lot of retail stores were closing to use distribution, but distribution was 3 times more expensive. With stores like Pier 1, where they've closed down all of their brick and mortar locations and gone online, have they been able to offset those costs of not having the retail locations and just relying solely on online sales?
I am not familiar with the individual situation of Pier 1 itself, but if you look at the industry, it is a choice, right? So you have a lot of companies that have been trying to sort of do well on both, right? So and you end up doing well on neither, right? Because and traditionally a company that's been around for a long time, right? They're very proud of their stores. They should be. They've been very successful with their brands. And for those companies, it's a very, very, very difficult choice to walk away from retail. It's decades of tradition, right? But time will tell whether online only is the right format. Some people are going to be successful in either formats. I mean, I'll tell you about a company called TJX. They're super successful today on a store format, because the product they sell, how they do it, and how they market it, they just have the formula that makes it very successful. So it's not necessarily that one or the other is always going to win on every category. It just depends on the solution and the brand and how they are attacking the problem. In case of Pier 1, maybe that's a great decision. I don't know. I think time will tell. Thank you.
We have time for one last question. Anybody else?
Well, we have
Okay,
3.
we can do 2 more questions.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. So the way I interpreted your presentation is that the industry and technology somehow has a very intertwined relationship, where technology serves as a solution to a lot of problems industry faces, and industry kind of dictate what kind of direction the technology is going to go. So how would you see this relationship develop into a further future? And would you say at one point the technology will be very advanced, where as industry or marketplace we have to cater for a better a different managing style or different operating style to to be more compatible with the technology?
So if I understand your question, let me paraphrase your question, because I wasn't sure I totally understood it. Your question is that there seems to be this sort of give and take between emerging technology and how industry uses it, and would the industry have to change because of the technology? Is that sort of the question? Okay, great. Look, I mean, technology is not developed on its own, right? People who develop technology are also in business. They have to have customers. They will have to make money, right? So it's not, when I'm talking about these technologies, these are not being developed by government grants or by universities, right? Which is fantastic for basic research, but in terms of providing products that people will buy, that's being done by commercial organizations. So just like any other business, those technology providers are going to adapt to what the industry needs. They are going to listen to their customers and make products. The technology that you see, that's going to best serve the customers they have. To use simple, if they're selling products to carriers, they're going to make their products so that product, that autonomous truck, is going to fit in as well as big carrier wants that to do, right? So, so I don't think it's going to change the relationship in the way you're thinking about it, because it is going to, the nature of commerce is such that the relationship between supplier and customer, who of the technology suppliers is going to dictate how things are going to develop. I think you yielded your time, so.
Anybody have one last question? Go ahead.
What kind of creative solutions have trucking and logistics companies been using to entice newer hires, as well as the people who are already there?
Okay, so the question is, what kind of creative solutions are logistics and transportation companies been using to hire workers and keep workers? Many things. So there are certainly financial ones. There are retention bonuses. There's bonuses for showing up for special days. There's bonuses for working different shifts and working for a certain period of time. There's retention bonuses. So if you take a job, you get a bonus. If you're there for 3 months, you get another bonus. You stay another 3 months, you get another bonus. So these are financial incentives. There's training incentives. So as I mentioned, a lot of people can't drive trucks because they don't have the training, but they would like to. Well, the companies are making it easier by helping them go to school and learn those trades and then giving them a job, right? The other ways companies are working that is creating changes in the workplace itself, how it is to do the work. So maybe you want music at work, right? Maybe you want the workstation that you work in be something different, right? Maybe you want food on a tough day at work, right? All those things are being done. I think many places have raffles. So you show up to work, and on certain days that are like supposed to be peak days, lots of people work very hard. At the end of the day, before you go home, there's a raffle, and you might walk away with a TV. So all those kinds of creative things to create an environment in the workplace where people have fun. I mean, that's the idea, to enjoy coming to work, even if you're doing an hourly job, right? So there's lots and lots of great people throughout the industry that work very hard. They care a lot about their employees, and they work very hard to create that work environment that meets their needs. Well, thank you again. You guys have been a fantastic audience. Thank you very much.
We just want to present Dr. Chowdhury with a little thank you for coming to UNLV from the MBA program. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we're here for you.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for coming. I hope you had a great time and learned a lot. So have a good night. Be safe.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.